Well, let's move forward with more news related to Palestine, and that's the ongoing ethnic cleansing agenda being pushed by the Trump administration and now trying to rope in close allies, Jordan and Egypt. And we are very, very honored to be joined once again here on the show by Ashish Prashar, who's a political strategist, former advisor to the Middle East peace envoy. As always, Ashish, great to have you here on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I guess we could start so many places. It feels like there's so many elements to this, but I'll just start with the Jordanian king. King Abdullah comes and he has the White House meeting with Trump. And of course, leading into it, he had made all these points. Well, we'll never take anyone out of Palestine. Then he says, we're going to take these 2,500 children. Now, of course, I think what he was meaning to say is people who needed medical care. So you don't want to say people who need medical care couldn't get it. But the way it felt, Ashish, was very like assuaging Trump. Like, okay, I know I said all this, but I don't want to seem like when I'm next to him that I'm not for ethnic cleansing fully. So let me say something that maybe will make him like it. I mean, it just spoke to just the thuggishness of how Trump is proceeding here with the so-called his, reconstruction plan with Gaza.
Well, Trump's new strategy seems to be ethnically cleanse Palestinians or kiss your aid goodbye. He's holding Egypt and Jordan hostage by threatening to cut off billions in aid unless they accept Palestinian refugees fleeing this genocide. But Trump seems to think that this financial leverage makes it a slam dunk. He can strong arm both nations into accepting ethnically cleansing refugees from Gaza. What's truly remarkable here is Trump's failure to understand the realities of the Middle East. His overestimating US influence while grossly underestimating the resilience of the Palestinian people who, Palestinian people have already said they're not leaving. The Palestinian struggle for liberation is not a pawn in Trump's diplomatic chess game. And it's certainly not something that can be solved by bribing nations who can also, by the way, get that money from other Gulf states that they're partners with. Look, for the king's part, the king didn't mention Palestinian interests once when when they were discussing forcibly displacing them. The interests of everyone involved, he described as. He prioritized the interests, frankly, of the US by sitting there while Trump was talking about ethnic cleansing than even his own nation. I understand people are going to say he's stuck between a rock and a hard place and is trying to maneuver without losing Jordan's privileges or causing himself domestic upheaval. But the reality is Jordan has done very little in the last 16 months to support the Palestinian cause. We've talked about this in the past. They've actually helped the land bridge, when Yemen has put, their people at risk by blocking the Red Sea from, supplies getting to Israel. Jordan helped facilitate the Saudi land bridge to get, goods and resources to Israel while there was less ways to get it there in the first place through shipping, and Jordan have said, openly, their foreign minister said, we will not, the displacement is off the table, but that's the least they can do. They could have ended this genocide alongside other neighbors in the region who haven't sacrificed anything either. And I'm excusing Lebanon from this, who've given up a great cost, but the other neighbors who basically sat there and let it take place when they could literally have been forced to blockade and shut down the Israeli occupation in a month.
Ashish, I think it's so interesting how Trump does this thing where he thinks that it's going to benefit the US, but actually either way you shoot yourself in the foot. And here's what I mean by that. So Jordan and Egypt receive a massive amount of aid from the US, and it largely helps to prop up these regimes, these police states, in the case of Jordan, a monarchy, that act in service to US empire and have normalized with Israel. And basically, like you just said, will actually collaborate with the Israelis against the Palestinians. That said, that US aid makes that possible, makes the stability of their regimes possible. However, if Palestinians are ethnically cleansed into Jordan and Egypt, this would also destabilize these US-backed regimes for a number of reasons. So it really puts the Jordanians and Egyptians, but I think more so the Jordanians because they're a bit weaker, between a rock and a hard place. And I'm just like, if you're Trump and you're the people of his administration, do you not recognize that either way you're like screwing over your ally? And also, this is why, of course, the Saudis and the Emiratis care too, because these people, they don't care about Palestinians, despite what their rhetoric might say. They do care about the stability of the Egyptian and Jordanian regimes, though, because they attach that to their own stability. So I'm just curious if you can speak to those contradictions and whether you think the Trump administration or the people that are maybe surrounding Trump are aware. of all these contradictions?
Well, I'm actually grateful to Trump. He's admitted in that room there's been a genocide. I think people have, with all the ethnic cleansing conversation, people have, jumped over the fact that he literally said, without using the word, that he's seen the end of a civilization. Who caused that was Netanyahu and obviously the previous administration, but openly saying that is really important. But also his open lawlessness, his obvious ignorance to international diplomacy, his public bullying, and, I guess we could call trademark vulgarity at this point, have pulled back the curtain on the reality of the US empire for everyone, frankly, in the region too, because it's like, we're only going to care about ourselves and this little colony that we want to keep there in Israel. Actually, all of you in the Middle East who we've said are our allies are kind of disposable too. You're going to take this deal or not. Otherwise, you're going to have problems yourself. He does not care about the domino effect on those Middle Eastern nations. Even those who did not want to see this under previous administrations are now forced to admit the reality of what, frankly, Biden has set up for Trump and the ruthlessness of the United States right now in this moment. And frankly, hopefully this will compel countries in the Middle East, Europe, and hopefully the global south to finally build an escape route from this US hegemony, because frankly, they're showing the world they'll throw everyone away. I will say this, though. Biden proposed the same thing to the Egyptians. They proposed this, and this has all been reported in Israeli media and in the US. They proposed taking the Palestinians to Sinai, and the Egyptians pushed back because they do understand that upheaval. And I just think that watching Sisi cancel his visit and put out his own plan to rebuild Gaza with Palestinians in there, he's already aware that he would lose his country tomorrow, frankly, I believe, if Palestinians were pushed into his country. And he would be deposed. And I really believe that, because no one would accept this. I think the majority of the Arab populations across all those countries, support the Palestinians. Jordan, like you said, is the more vulnerable one, because, there's the estimates that 35% of Jordanians are Palestinian. I think the estimate actually is 85%. If you think about descendants of refugees from the Nakba who've had kids and grandkids, they might be Jordanian, but they're also Palestinian. So that support is huge. And I would foresee the uprooting of both those administrations if they were forced into the situation. I think the thing that those administrations or those effect dictatorships can account for is, I think they can make up the pool that Trump would threaten to remove. I think the UAE, the Saudis, to your point, are going to throw that money at them so they don't have to take in those refugees, and they can say no to Trump the same way they both said no to Biden.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a great point. And we have some proof of concept in Egypt, since we know that many of the organizing circles that brought down Mubarak started in the aid relief between Palestinians who came across from Gaza in 2008 and Egyptians who came to help them obtain the things that they needed for their human rights. And, I'm glad you raised the point about Biden having also proposed this, because, it does, I think, also speak to the sort of long-term agenda here of ethnic cleansing, because, I can even remember in the Oslo period in the 90s, that's what they were saying is, that Gaza is going to be a Riviera on the Mediterranean and all these other things. It's this long-term vision to get Palestinians out of Gaza and to turn it into some sort of commercial opportunity. But it does feel like there's probably many of these moments every single day, but like this didn't just start yesterday. This really is it's not just Trump, it's not just Biden, it's the culmination of a long-term set of plans.
I think it's American foreign policy. It's been American foreign policy for decades. Reagan, Clinton, Bush 1, Bush 2 probably was the least problematic on Palestine specifically. Obama, while they all say gestures, they always talk about the work they've done to try to bring peace to the region. I can't look to anything they've done over their entire timeline that shows they've actually cared about the lives of the Palestinians. All they've done is help the Israeli occupation expand their land grab, given them excuses to do this, offered deals that took away Palestinian territory. I remember Clinton still today says he offered Yasser Arafat the deal of a lifetime by losing all his territory, the deal of a lifetime. So everyone's angry that Donald Trump is being so blunt. I think Americans are angry that he's blunt because he really just pulls the mask off of who America is. I think Western leaders are angry at Donald Trump's vulgarity in this because it pulls the mask off of what the West is. They're so used to being unified and gaslight you together that they can't accept that this is actually who they really are. You only have to look what he's doing right now, and I don't mean to switch topics, with Russia and Ukraine. The West is already kind of shaking, with that, with his move to say he's not going to let Ukraine into NATO. You're seeing England and Britain and France and everyone else say, how could he? because he's showing, frankly, that America has only ever cared about America itself and whatever interest it has in any region.
I think about the fact that these are red lines, the ethnically cleansing of Palestinians into Jordan and Egypt. It's red lines for Jordan and Egypt. It's been a red line, as you mentioned. Biden did try to sell this to Egypt, and it was a hard no. Like, there's no amount of money that you can give us for us to allow this to happen. So, and like you said, the Gulf states may, even if they really do pull aid, the Americans, the Gulf states may step in and fill in the gap because it's tied to their stability as well. So with all that in mind, we watch this also in parallel. Ceasefire has happened in Gaza, and it's kind of on the precipice of perhaps breaking down, perhaps not, but it's always seeming like it could easily break down and fall apart, and we could return to genocide. We know the Israelis aren't finished, and they would actually really like to return to destroying whatever is left of Gaza, including the people there. And I'm raising all that to say, it seems like we may be reaching a point where Gaza is just, for an indefinite period of time, a place of rubble and people with nowhere to go who are just perpetually or, frequently being subjected to mass bombardment. And that is just kind of the normal. I mean, it's a horrifying prospect, but I don't know. I'm just curious, like what you think about where this could go, because I just don't see anything else but that in the future right now.
I mean, you obviously personally can attest to how Israel never actually has never ceased fire. It's happening in Lebanon right now, right? So are we surprised the occupation has failed to uphold its promises on this first phase? Under the terms of the deal, they were required to send hundreds of thousands of tents into Gaza, a massive amount of aid, and they failed to do so. Couple that with the fact that the Israeli occupation has basically failed to cease fire. They've killed, I think, over 100 Palestinians now. They've injured nearly 1,000 through direct targeting. This isn't just accidental targeting, and this is all since January 19. It's been established beyond doubt that the occupation is to blame for this precarious state of the ceasefire today. And that's not coming from me or you. That's coming from inside the occupation's regime, its military, who've briefed their own media and the New York Times. And if you want to go back to facts, as you all know, the Israeli occupation has, I think, signed 6 ceasefire agreements with the Palestinian resistance since 2008. That's 8, 12, 14, 19, 21. Each time, they are the ones who breach and violate the ceasefire. And the international community has no reason to trust they will continue this. I think, Netanyahu, as you point out, is hell-bent on breaking the ceasefire, but it's never really stopped, to your point. Like, the ethnic cleansing just moved to the West Bank. They have arrested more people, by the way, or detained and held without charge more people than they are releasing to the Palestinians right now. They are killing people and killing children in the West Bank indiscriminately. And yes, they'd probably like to start this whole thing again. The only promising news is, since Trump's bombastic, his, what does he likes to say, all hell will break loose if, hostages aren't released on Saturday. I always think that's not just directed at Hamas. I think it's directed at the Israeli regime too, because Hamas stood firm. And because the occupation is genuinely violating the ceasefire, especially the aid part that everyone's focused on, the very occupation, by the way, that said it would arm and get ready for Saturday. When Trump said those remarks, 801 trucks of aid entered Gaza. The Israeli occupation today basically caved to Hamas again and lost again because, everyone watching knows that they're the one breaching the agreement, and even the Americans. And I think the Americans, I go back to what little bits of hope we can look for, is I think Donald Trump doesn't want this to continue to be front page news for 4 years. Now, does that mean ethnic cleansing will not continue in the region? I don't think so. But I don't think the Israeli military want to go toe-to-toe with Hamas anymore. They're exhausted and actually took a massive loss. Again, reported in their media today by their own generals and their own media that it was a humiliating loss on the ground. And I think the only thing that's going to change this, like how aggressively they go after it, is whether they get the green light to annex the West Bank, which I believe at some point in this administration they will get that green light, but they're already doing that discreetly. And I think if Trump's version of ethnic cleansing is a quiet ethnic cleansing that isn't in the media, that does not mean drop 2,000, 5,000 pound bombs and make it the front page of every news outlet in the world, or or broadcast channel. He wants it done by settlers and other people and other means, maybe starvation. This is all horrible, but it also gives the Palestinian resistance the chance to fight back. It also gives other people who support this the ability to, if it's not taking place in this aggressive manner, to rally around Palestinians and fight back against the Israeli occupation.
That's a great point. And, we're seeing it on multiple levels. I mean, last time we had you when we were talking about football, we saw Celtic, come out with the huge give Israel the red card. Obviously, that's going to continue on a range of different fronts. So I guess that's always you hate to say silver lining in the cloud, but the element of this that I think we can't ignore is that this huge mass popular movement has erupted. Some governments are, at least doing something in relationship to that, and there may be more there. But Ashish, as always, it really is an honor to have you here. Great to have you sorting through all these issues, helping us get on top of them. Ashish Prashar, thanks so much for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.